Hey, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I know it's been a long time since I put a video out. I wanted to say how I'm doing. I'm at college right now. My dad wanted me to go back to college for many years, and I never thought that I would. I never thought that I would. When I finally made that decision, it was a decision I made for myself. My dad is a Christian pastor, and I used to try not to pick a side. I used to say that anybody of any religion it can be a generally good person, but I started to realize the truth. Here's the truth. Religion breeds hatred and intolerance. You've got 100 people, each a unique religion, each claiming their God is the only true God and all others are false gods, and they're willing, many of them, to die for that belief. I don't stay in the middle anymore. This is not a live and let live world. I really, really hate those people who say, "Oh, Jesus loves you." I used to be a salesperson. I've worked actually four, I guess, different sales jobs. One of them was actually going door to door. I was literally the door to door salesman for about three and a half, about 4 weeks. Kid you not, this one woman, I knocked on her door and I started talking to her, and within 4 seconds, she said, Do you know about the Lord Jesus Christ? Now I was not happy. I was a little bit like what's wrong with you? Like, can't we just be human beings? And I really controlled myself because I was wearing the company shirt and the company jacket, and I think that that makes a big impact on how people, they behave differently when they know they're being perceived through a specific lens. I've been following this Napoleon Hill philosophy. It's called Think and Grow Rich, and his original work is called The Law of Success, and I put both of them into practice. One of the later ones, actually in the 50s, because he was still alive until 70s, 70 or 71. Well, Think and Grow Rich is the big one, and although I've read a couple others written by the same author, Think and Grow Rich is the one that's the most popular. It's got the most in volume number of books that were actually sold, being read by the American public, and according to a few sources, Think and Grow Rich is responsible for more self-made millionaires than any book ever. It is the original book, as far as I'm concerned, on the law of attraction. So I've been going at it. I've been doing the law of attraction. I've been doing Think and Grow Rich for about a year and a half. Now, am I disheartened that nothing's shown up yet? Not at all. Here's why. A friend of mine turned me on to a YouTube channel called Bob Proctor. He just died, I think, in February of 22. And he put out this seminar back in the 70s and 80s called You Were Born Rich. He also wrote it in a book. And so you can get basically the same information through either the book or the seminar. By golly, I've done both. I've actually listened to the seminar. It's probably about 10 hours, all 6 parts. There are 6 parts to it. And it's probably about 10 hours if you listen to the whole thing. I've listened to the whole thing probably 5 times, maybe 6, maybe 7, honest. I know what it's about. I know what it is. It's the reason I started carrying around a gold card. Funny story, in the first week of school, I actually carried my gold card around and with this friend of mine. And we'd go around and talk to people. And I did it a whole bunch by myself too. But I wasn't with him the whole time. And I'd go around to people and I'd say, hey, can I. A couple of times I actually sort of made up a story. I fibbed a little bit and I said that I found it on the ground as if it wasn't mine. But of course it was written in my handwriting. But of course there was no way for them to know that anyway. It was my gold card. He said that a gold card is actually what makes a pretty big difference. This guy had a gold card. He wrote his goal on a card and carried it around in his pocket for 5 years. He said that the day before the 5 year mark, there was no evidence that any progress was being made. And literally the day of his goal that he had wrote down, the exact day, he got a phone call and he got his wish. He got his goal. It's literally, it's like rubbing the lamp, right? Aladdin, the genie, the wishes. Stupid. Always ask for 100 more wishes, right? So I've been doing the Think and Grow Rich for about a year and a half. So I figure, and so one guy got it in about 4 years, another guy took him 5 years. So I figure I got about, on average, about 4 or 5 years, and I'm already a year and a half in. Now I'm doing pretty good now because I started that when I was at 23. That is when I took it serious. I bought the book when I was 19. And when I was 21, I read through one of the chapters, but I didn't read the rest of the book. And then it's pretty interesting. I read through the same chapter like 20 times, but I didn't read the rest of the book. But when I turned 23, when I was like mid 23, I started really taking it seriously, doing everything that it says. And there's 13 steps. I sort of got it memorized because when I was the delivery driver person for a couple of years there, I would actually go out to random people in the parking lots and whatever else, and in the restaurants, Taco Bell, all the different, fast food joints. And gosh, 25, 35, maybe 65 different fast food joints. I mean, I've been to every single one of them, and I'd be going in there and I'd be saying, "Hey, would you like to know how to get rich?" And a couple times they'd tell me "F off," right? And every once in a while, a guy'd buy a book. I literally sold 20 books this way. Sold 20 books. Why? Because I knew, according to Napoleon Hill philosophy, you have to have other people who read and apply the same exact philosophy from the same book. He says it's absolutely essential. It's absolutely crucial. You have to follow through with it. There's no exceptions. Nobody wins at this game, no matter how much law of attraction BS you want to put yourself through, no matter how many goal cards you write up and how long you carry it. None of that matters if you don't have a mastermind alliance. So I've known for a long time a mastermind alliance is exactly what I need in order to continue applying all 13 steps, because right now I'm only applying 12 or like 12 and a half, but because I've actually sold a couple books on campus too. It's not, yeah, I'm going to keep doing it until I get my mastermind. I'm going to sell all the books I can. So Jesus is a myth. He's made up. He's a fictional character from a fictional story. It's a direct ripoff from Egyptian mythology and Egyptian religions, which predate it by some say more than 3,000 years. There was a character from Egyptian mythology called Horus, and Horus was he was a god, right? And all of the same stuff. He literally was born of a virgin, had 12 disciples, was baptized, raised a guy from the dead, who basically had the same name. Al-Azurus is the same as Lazarus. So it's literally, it's a point for point copy. And every single Christian you meet, they're going to say that, oh, that's just an Egyptian God. That's not the real God. And then we get back to the 100 people with 100 different religions scenario where it just breeds hatred upon hatred upon hatred. And me personally, I don't live with hatred. I don't like hatred. I don't like hatred to exist with anyone I ever come into contact with. Realistically, I will have to interact with certain people once in a while, but like in terms of my friends and my close circle, in terms of those other people who are reading Think and Grow Rich in my mastermind alliance, I don't want a single person in my mastermind alliance who's going to be like talking about some sort of religion like they're all in it, like it's the truth. In addition to selling the book a lot when I was out doing those delivery, because I was a delivery driver for like 6 years, and I worked in a warehouse a little bit there towards the end, but I was basically a delivery driver this whole time after I like left college in 2015. It's kind of the story of my life. So yeah. I actually had this one auto suggestion written down. I carry a book, so I have the law of attraction not only with things that I recite out loud, say them and listen to them. I'm listening to one right now in my little earbud, And so it's like, it's more than that though. It's more than audio. It's also visual. It's what you're watching. And it also touches on holistic health. People who don't understand the law of attraction. See, when I give somebody a book, the Think and Grow Rich book, I feel like I'm doing my, like, to use the Good Samaritan, literally, I feel like I'm doing the good work of the world by giving this out and selling this and charging for it, because people who don't pay for stuff oftentimes don't realize the value for what they have. And I figure, if I just give this away for free, then one thing, I'm going into debt myself, and for another thing, they're probably not even going to read it because they didn't pay for it. They're like, so what? It's just some book some guy gave me, But if I make them pay for it themselves, then they feel invested. They are invested. They feel like, well, here's this book, and I did pay for it, so well, I might as well read it. And so according to the chapter on sex transmutation, the sort of love life that you have makes a big difference. The sort of romance, the sort of sex that you're having, it really makes a big difference who you're with, because that influences you in a whole lot of spiritual ways. I mean, that's the Think and Grow Rich. It talks about some air quote spiritual stuff in a very limited way. It's not focused on, and so there's nothing attached to it. But anyway, he says that it's an explanation for the old saying. Some people have heard this. The saying goes, "A man's wife will either make him or break him." That's a saying that's been going on for generations, literally, because this book was published in 1937, and this book is talking about a saying that was going on before that, right? Before that. So it's been going on, more than 100 years. And it's a pretty common saying. And what's interesting is in that book, in Think and Grow Rich, he says, and here's why. And he goes down and breaks it down and explains it. And he says it's because of the woman's understanding or lack of understanding of sex transmutation. He says that men may become unstoppable when dealing with other men, when dealing with business transactions and so forth, with strangers, with business, little bit distanced, if you will. But with the woman of your choice, with the love life you have, is going to, he says that men basically fold like a little piece of paper. Like when they're dealing with other men, they're a rod of steel. When dealing with women, they become a feather, a little tissue paper, right? They're really different based on who they're around. He sort of makes fun of and in the beginning of that same chapter, because that part that I just told you about is at the end of that chapter. At the beginning of that chapter, he says that what sex transmutation is, because the word transmutation means changing from one form of energy into another form of energy or direction of energy. Okay? He says that sex energy, sex expression, is the top of the list for mind stimulants. In order for your mind to achieve the things that you want to achieve and get the things that you want to get, in order for all of the affirmations to pay off, you have to be connected, tuned in with this infinite intelligence in order for the solutions to be received by your processing station, that little noggin inside of your brain, inside of your skull, that makes you, it's powerful. He says, in order for you to be receptive to the solutions you need for the unique goal that you've set up, you have to be tuned in at this high level of vibration. Thoughts occur at specific frequencies. Every thought has a frequency. To get what you want, you need your thoughts at a extremely high level frequency. You need your thoughts way up there in the frequency level. And the only way to do that is through mind stimulants. He gives the explanation that there are, I think, 8, maybe 10 different mind stimulants. And he says that alcohol is a stimulant, narcotics, liquor, that stuff is a stimulant. He says that other stimulants that motivate people to action, these are things that can influence how your cognition. And there are things that we want to be famous, we want to have money, we want to have freedom. These are things that we want to have. And also sex is this energy that naturally is like something that people want to have. And basically he's saying that you have the there's an old problem in physics. They say that sometimes bring up as like a sort of like a cliche teaching opportunity, and that is that when a unstoppable force meets an immovable object. The question is kind of farcical, and I'm not going to go into any of the explanation of it, but that analogy is useful because that unstoppable force is kind of like what happens with sex energy. When you have your sex energy, he says that there's this thing that happens where men rarely succeed before the age of 40. Most of them go through life not being very successful. They reach their 40s and all of a sudden, boom, overnight success. And it is a very common phenomenon, especially back then, probably today too. And he says this is why. Because men rarely ever realize that sex is something that is more than physical. Most people never consider the idea that sex is more than physical. All they think is physical. It biases the mind. Bias. So he's suggesting that sex is something more than physical. Sex is something non-physical. It's gotten to the point now where I think that sex in and of itself is primarily a non-physical activity. Now, obviously, that's not the penetration sex. So it depends if you're talking about sex, the thing, or sex, the energy. And for the most part, I'm, talking. But anyway. So I watched this documentary that explains a little bit about various world religions, and sure enough, it's not just Egyptian mythology. There are like 8 different references for different mythologies around different parts of the world at different time periods that all predate the Jesus myth, and they all have the same story. They all have the virgin birth. They all have the died, 3 days, buried, resurrected. They all have it. It's I see it as a national emergency, probably a global emergency. I mean, if you consider the fact that religion is not just, because I made the argument that religion is for hatred, and that argument's been made. Religion is also for bloodshed. That is also a very accurate statement that I'd like to argue. We teach science in public schools because we as a society decided that this is something all people should be aware of. Okay, it's all about level of awareness. And there are parts of the country now where they take a real science book, and they scribble all over it with made up Bojingo Fazingo. I mean, made up wobbly woobly. It's a crisis. It's an emergency. Teaching people the Noah's Ark story in a science class, it's like, what? Because I'm basically leading on to the point of evolution. According to the theory of evolution, the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, give or take. It's about 4.5 billion years old, and that's actually a very small amount of time on a cosmic scale. That seems a pretty obvious fact that most anybody reputable would agree with. The fact that there's more than more than 100 million Americans who literally believe that the planet Earth is less than 10,000 years old. If that's not a crisis, what would you call it?